All right, everybody, welcome to the final seminar for the year 2025 here at Theory Underground, at least the final McKerracher installment. I'm really excited to have you all here, especially after Benjamin just gave his final one. And I kind of want to probably jump into this off of a sort of black pill approach that I think Theory Underground is good at. We're really good at another word for the black pill, a sort of critical way of looking at things. Critical can be taken as synonymous, though, with pessimistic or cynical. And pessimistic or cynical theories as a mode of comportment and priority of focusing on things does have this tendency to give way to all kinds of problems. In particular, misanthropy is a really big one. So next year, during the book discussion series, we're going to get into, among many other fantastic texts, this one called Ordinary Vices by Judith Sklar, in which she talks about too much of a focus on being anti-cruelty can often make people cruel. Not just cruel, but also give up on life in a very misanthropic way. I think that way of thinking that she details is something that we could all kind of base ourselves in. Exactly, Benjamin said, ordinary vices is tons of fun, right? Yeah, it's tons of fun. And the idea that you can care too much about one thing to a fault goes well with what G.K. Chesterton says in Orthodoxy, which I've read a couple times this year, where he says that it's not that after the death of God, we became, society lost all virtue. He says, actually, we became too virtuous in a sense. He says, whereas for someone like Aquinas, virtue is something that you balance. You balance a bunch of virtues against one another, right? You're trying to, I mean, really prudence as the king among the virtues is about finding the mean between extremes. And every one of the virtues is a mean between extremes. And so the process of character formation that tries to be grounded in a virtuous life is a balancing act. But what Chesterton is pointing out is that after the death of God, when people no longer have a reliable sort of education in the virtues, what ends up happening is you have some sort of a base intuition where you discover some kind of virtue that really resonates with you. And then it becomes your sole prerogative, your modus operandi, your single organizing principle. And when that happens, you lose all of the other virtues and the ability to develop prudence as you live that more balanced approach to virtue. And then, of course, I think he uses the example of Leo Tolstoy as a perfect example of somebody who takes it to the extreme. He's a sort of extreme universalist anarchist, do no harm. And he becomes so taken by this one approach that which I think is charity. I think that's the virtue in particular that he takes up. Charity becomes the single organizing principle that he loses on everything, on every other front. That's how you can become too virtuous, according to Chesterton, right? And the way that related back to Judith Sklar's Ordinary Vices was that becoming anti-cruelty can make you misanthropic. And misanthropy, for those who do not know, is just a sort of hatred of humanity. And I would add and sort of expand to that it doesn't just have to be a hatred towards humanity, but it can just be a sort of you feel depressed when you think about the prospects for human beings. So it doesn't have to be a hatred of humanity, but I would say that a hatred of the PMC or a hatred of the general populace, either one of those is obviously a form of misanthropy and something that comes from over prioritizing a single attunement and the kind of value prioritization that follows from that being the only real way that you disclose the world to yourself.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of the situation that short-circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
So I think Theory Underground's been pretty good about not overly blackpilling people and always kind of having a, I don't want to say optimistic take on things, but a sober enough take that does not just give up, right? This is not pointless what we do here, right? Yet at the same time, what I became very conscious of due to the repercussions of certain decisions made over the last 3 years was that too much of an emphasis of a very important and good thing does result in something bad. And the way that I have been putting it recently, you may have seen this get posted around or something, is the idea that deconstruction and critique without building and cultivation is just really bad. It's just really bad. It takes people into a dark place on a routine sort of basis. And that becomes, for some folks, their primary way of relating to other people. Like I had a person say when they joined a Zoom call with us, this is the first time that I've gotten out of my solitude now for over 100 days. And I was thinking, you didn't get out of your solitude. If this is what you mean by getting out of your solitude, then you really do need to go touch grass, in the sense of not a Zoom call, but I don't care. I don't know. Anything would be better than your only way of interacting with other people being the internet, right? The internet's a great thing, but if it's your primary way of organizing with other people, it's going to lead to problems. How much more so when the only things you do on the internet are sort of giving you this steady dosage of black pills, right? There's a problem here. And so little wonder then that I, on a regular basis, am confronted with what feels like a very sort of schizophrenic kind of message or email from a person who's going through a very paranoid period where they've kind of lost touch with reality. I think that kind of email is normal nowadays for anybody doing anything on the internet if they have anything that could be considered a creator or influencer sort of role or position in the attention economy, because it's the sort of mainstreaming of something that celebrities were already dealing with, right? And so the example of that comes to mind probably for many of the millennials among us would be the song Stan, where Eminem is he's got a character whose name is Stan, who's writing him fan mail, and it ends very darkly. But the person is clearly like losing sense of touch with reality, right? And then when a person says that they stan somebody as a fan, this is kind of just like an ironic way of saying, like, you're that person losing sense of reality because you're so parasocially attached to some figure, right? And a big point of Theory Underground's critical media theory course or seminars for 2 years was exactly that, to become more critical of that relationship. But also, that was the point of the tour. The tours happened in conjunction with those seminars. The point of meeting you guys in real life is to break through the parasocial. And then once you realize we're just people too, maybe you'll be over it and you'll move on to other things. But also potentially the parasocial hold wasn't that strong, or the relation is able to mature beyond that initial phantasmatic sort of relation, right? So I do that for myself, but also not just for my mental health, not just for the relationship to the audience or whatever, but also because insofar as theory underground is underground, part of how I think of the underground is I never cared about music after the age of 14. I never cared about music coming from people that I didn't have a possibility of meeting. And that's a very weird thing. And it's a very punk sort of thing. But it was like, I just care about music that doesn't come from people who are, these sort of imaginary icons that you have to stand in line and scream, and reach out just to hope to touch. No, no, no. I listen to music by real people. I listen to music by real people who I could actually meet and have a real conversation with. And who was the band we saw? And then they were walking by, and I said something to one of them, and then we had a whole conversation, and the whole thing just felt very natural. And Anne commented on how natural that felt after they had left. And to me, it's like, yeah, the reason that was so natural was because I come out of a music scene where I only engaged with rock stars who they're going to actually talk to you, right?
Yeah, was it Dirty Honey?
Yeah,
or the band that opened for them in Boise, yeah.
Right. It was Dirty Honey. And I've always thought that it's important. And when I used to think it was important, I think it was kind of just like this punk, I will not grovel or develop myself in relation to a kind of music that is out of reach of real human contact. And nowadays, this idea of touring in the underground and while doing critical media theory, it is also to combat what we now consider parasociality and all of that stuff. But in building up, as I did here at the beginning, on this idea of overdoing something, I think what has been overdone that has resulted in a little too much black pilling is in particular the critical media angle, the critical media theory angle. Really critique, period, without balancing it out. And so we did try to have a practical component with critical media theory, but it was the worst mistake ever. It was to take a little bit of time away from your phone and actually journal in like a diary kind of thing, like, talk about your day, reflect on it, reflect on your experiences, your struggle with the medium, what have you. And, especially if you can do that with pen and paper, so you're not being distracted by the distraction medium, great. The problem with that, several problems with that, but one of the major problems with that, if you want to go any deeper, would be through reading Abigail Schreier's Bad Therapy, which is the newest in a awesome new sort of area of scholarship that I'm interested in, that has to do with therapy culture or therapism. Therapism, I think, is the term that the sort of civic libertarian right-wing adjacent or at least left critical feminist named Christina Hoff Sommers develops in her book called One Nation Under Therapy. And before it, a few years before it, that Ferretti, what's his first name again? Ferretti, Ashley Frowley actually studied under this guy, and she got a lot of flack for it for a while. Is it Frank Ferretti? I don't think so. But anyway, Ferretti wrote this book called Therapy Culture. And so Therapy Culture, One Nation Under Therapy, and then the most recent addition to this lineage, as far as I can tell, like the most important one being Abigail Schreier's Bad Therapy, develops a thesis that goes well with the comfort crisis and the coddling of the American mind and the closing of the American mind, all three of which in various ways are getting at this idea that we are losing the ability to do discomforting things. Now, obviously, there's a huge problem with that. None of these people take capital seriously enough. And so I think all of them fall into a trap of like not thinking about how classed this actually is, right? We compartmentalize the difficult things that we do. There is work, which is a job, which is uncomfortable, and we are all prepared for our whole lives to steel our minds to go into the workplace. And then there's the consumer activities, and that's where the money back guarantee is comfort. And then, if you're successful enough to make it into the university system, of course, it doesn't require being that successful nowadays, but if you do have presumably some kind of a future in the university system, the comfort thing is really interesting because now it's like you want the university to be comfortable and provide you with a safe space, right? But the thing is you already had to steel your mind and go do discomforting things just to make it through school. Being at the school is not an easy thing. Some people, maybe their attunement sets them up to be naturally good at it. But for a lot of people, it's like a sort of systemic hazing, right? It's a systemic hazing over a long period of time that organizes their libidinal economies, their desire and their drive in relation to not normal forms of work, really. Not when I say normal, let me just go ahead and say not hunting and gathering and sort of like these sort of tried and true approaches, but instead develops you to show up to places on time and do things for abstract or impersonal systems that are usually corporate in nature, but after the university could be increasingly bureaucratic. But overall, the schooling system, it is developing us in relation to that thing. And it is this weird balancing act between discomfort and comfort. And so different institutions will try to make different aspects of that experience comfortable. But overall, you are supposed to be learning how to endure specific kinds of discomfort that undermine us. Okay. So with that said, the connection to why the journaling was such a mistake with critical media theory was that it was encouraging you to do exactly what Ferretti, Hoff-Sommers, and Schreier are all discouraging, which is over reflecting, turning things back onto yourself and asking, how am I doing? How am I doing? How does this make me feel? How am I doing? How am I doing? How does this make me feel? It's this mantra, right? It's a mantra. You could almost do a two-step to it. How am I doing? How am I doing? How does it make me feel? Okay, but it's not good, according to all of the research that they cite. Now, when they are citing research, Ferretti or Hoff-Sommers, they're mostly going off of stuff that was from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, which is when those books were published. When Schreier does it, she's doing it in the 2020s. So it's a lot more up to date. There's been a lot more research along this line of thought. And so one thing that I encourage you all strongly to do is to pick up a copy of Bad Therapy, give it a listen, especially if you have a tendency to over-reflect on things. The point is, for a lot of anxiety, the solution is to stop asking yourself how you're doing and to cultivate caring about things outside of yourself. To cultivate caring about other people outside of yourself, and not in a worst case scenario sort of hypothetical relation, but just in an actual sustained way. And the sustained way is what I wanted to sort of bring it back down to here. What we were having you do in a sustained way was reflecting on how the medium is making you feel, how you're struggling with the addictive side of things. I think that there's potentially good things to come from that. There are potentially good things to come from that. And I think that a lot of the people who spent some serious time doing that over those 2 years, 2023 and 2024, no doubt developed a whole new theoretical relation to the medium that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And that's great. But also for some of us, it made the addictiveness of the medium more intense and amped up the guilt side of things. The point of critique is to never, make us feel guilty, but nevertheless, it does, right? It does. And so it would have been much better to think deeper about the kinds of grounding that we need in our lives when a lot of it is being mediated by the internet. As Benjamin said in his seminar, a lot of times this term touching grass is very vague or abstract, which is part of the reason why at the retreat I went into kinds of grounding in one of my talks, which is something that I want to go into deeper with you all in 2026. There are different kinds of grounding. There's literal grounding, which is to say, letting your feet touch the earth for a prolonged period of time. And there's all kinds of health benefits that can come from that. And then there's nature grounding. 15 minutes in nature can lower your blood pressure or raise it back to where it needs to be. This is brand new research coming out of Japan. And if you want to read about that, look up Shinrin Yoku, the art of Japanese nature bathing. Another fantastic title to add to your Audible catalog if you're an Audible enjoyer, but also you can just pick it up off of Anna's archive via PDF or EPUB, no problemo. But that idea, not just that nature can lower or raise your blood pressure to help you out, but really that nature is healthy. And that exposure to it is good for us. That would be another kind of grounding. But then there's also socializing. And I would say that in a world where most people are working, 5.5 billion of us at least, work in regular jobs, in that kind of horizon, that being attuned to the norms of, I go to work, I work around people that I would not choose to live around otherwise. I'm not trying to change who they are in significant ways. We tolerate each other. It's kind of like roommates, right? Like coworkers are kind of like roommates, except that instead of like, if they leave the sink full of dirty dishes, it's a problem. It's instead like if they do X, Y, or Z thing in the workplace, it becomes a problem. But the point is that is somebody else's kids, and it's not the kind of person that you were probably going to go out of your way to hang out with. That's a kind of touching grass too. It's a kind of getting grounded. And if you don't experience that regularly, good luck relating to 5.5 billion of the people on the planet, right? And then, of course, there are more professional sort of network fields, right? Networky fields of relationships and those specific horizons of possibility. And so maybe that's another way to get grounded, right? There's also getting grounded in solitude as opposed to solicitude, the virtuous circle, as we talk about, right? And then there's another thing that's kind of like all of those things, but and maybe in a sort of sense, it literally unifies all of those things into one practice. And that would be, okay, it doesn't unify all of those things, but it unifies many of those things. And that would be like gardening, which puts you into a serious relationship with the seasons. The seasons and nature and natality. It puts you into a deliberate relation to nature and natality that we can describe as nurturing. A nurturing relationship to nature and natality. As would, of course, becoming a parent. In both cases, between the garden and the parent, we're talking about, I should say that between the garden and the child. Like the similarity here is that if you do not feed and water it, it will die. If you do not clean up after it, it's going to get really bad, right? So this would also, at this level of analysis, include pets. It would include pets. We're talking about having dependents, right? There are dependents whose life, whose nourishment, and whose real possibilities come back down to, what do you do every day? Do you show up? You know, does the parent show up every day, or do they kind of just like say, oh, bye, hi, bye, hi, and become a glorified roommate? You know, are they really showing up for you in a way that teachers and babysitters or nannies are not capable of? Because, you know, teachers and nannies and babysitters, they do not have the right to relate to you in the ways that a parent does. Not only the right at a legal level, of course, I'm not really talking about the legal kind of right, but there's something between a parent and a child that, you know, is hard to displace. And when people have gone for state-funded daycare approaches in other countries, especially, there's been significant backfire. I was reading a Substack about this recently, and supposedly there's new research. I keep saying new research, and I don't like to do that because I don't like anything that I'm saying to really hinge on the research. You know, in this case, apparently there's studies that also say that. Do we really need a study to say that, though? I would say no. The parent is obviously capable of doing things that a person who is overseeing a whole mass of kids is simply not going to be capable of doing or providing, right? We could obviously dial it in to a smaller, a tighter ratio between teacher and student, where it's like 1:7, and that would radically increase their ability to nurture your talents, your capacities, right? So when we say nurturing nature and natality, there is the nature of the child, what is in their nature, and there is, of course, going to be something universal between that child and all other children. But then there's also like what is in your nature, as in your predispositions, your inherent tendencies, and how many of those are manifest as opposed to latent. At the point that we're describing a child as problematic, the question is, so that's part of their nature that has become manifest, but were there other capacities that are also there that have remained dormant or latent because they were undernourished, because there was no real time with adult others? Well, all of these things raise for us questions about nature, nurture, and natality, or as I like to say, nurturing nature and natality. And how does that relate to stewardship and also the philosophy of home economics? So the course, one of them that I'm rolling out for 2026, is called The Philosophy of Stewardship and Home Economics. And it's meant to sort of counterbalance this vicious tendency of doing a monthly thing, the focus of which is negative, which we're still going to do because Intro to Theory is also kicking off. Now, Intro to Theory is fantastic. I'm very excited about it. I'm going to give an introductory lecture to the one, the only, Karl Marx. I might give one on Immanuel Kant before Marx. I might either do Hegel or have someone else do Hegel. I will also for certain be doing Martin Heidegger, Emmanuel Levinas, Jacques Lacan, as well as Pierre Bourdieu and Jean Baudrillard, with high likelihood of also doing Hannah Arendt, Jacques Derrida, and well, it's probably going to be Foucault or Lyotard. Okay. Now I love these guys, and I was just having a great conversation with somebody who's going to be giving a guest lecture as a part of Intro to Theory, Spencer Leonard of Platypus Affiliated Society. He's one of the co-founders. Him and Chris Catrone go way back. They're good friends. And Spencer Leonard is sort of an archetypical professor, a really fantastic professor, you know. And he's going to be giving an introductory lecture on Durkheim, Emile Durkheim. In the same way that it's likely we'll also be, for instance, getting an introductory lecture from a longtime friend of the channel now, at least long time in terms of internet years, Dr. Laurie Johnson on Edmund Burke. The point of those guest lectures, as you might have already noticed, is to do people that I don't tend to teach. Like if you listen to my Introduction to Critical Social Theory courses that I taught at Boise State, then you know that I touch on Durkheim as much as it is necessary to do anything in sociology. But outside of that, it's not like he's my guy. And it's not like I have a lot to say about him compared to someone like Spencer Leonard, who is technically employed at a sociology department and has spent a lot of time thinking deeply about liberalism and liberal sociology and the ways in which guys like Durkheim have a lot to say, even to someone who, like him, would be more of a Marxist or a socialist or what have you, right? And so bringing in a mixture of left or right, or neither left nor right, professors to teach one-off introductory lectures, like that's exciting. Like it's super, super exciting for me. For instance, there's like a 98% likelihood that we'll have a special introductory one-off lecture on Max Stirner from Elliot Rosenstock, right? So really think about anybody that I've ever done anything with in an MSTU or had on for any kind of an interview, and there's more than a coin's toss of likelihood that they might be making an appearance to give an introductory sort of 101 lecture on a thinker, usually one who is not trendy in the theory scene. Like Edmund Burke is not trendy in the theory scene, right? Like not Durkheim and Stirner. Well, okay, Stirner a little bit, but not Durkheim, right? This is happening monthly, the lectures that I'll be giving for this course, and we will also have monthly guest lectures, sometimes more than one per month. Really, it depends. So with all of that said, in a minute here, I'm going to be diving into the philosophy of stewardship and household economics syllabus with you all. And Anne and I are going to take a minute to dive in deeper to what is meant by stewardship. But in particular, what I want to be doing is drawing this sort of contrast between these two courses. Theory, you know, the sophisticated intellectual black pill, and on the other side, wholesome theory, adulting 101, the philosophy of stewardship and home economics. It's wholesome as fuck. And I think critical theory needs to be balanced with wholesome theory. I just think that that's a very important thing. But for anyone who's been following my work for a while now, you might be aware that Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Lacan, Bourdieu, Baudrillard, but also thinkers like Illich, Lasch, Postman, Arendt, they're very important somehow. But how? Like how? How are they actually important? I left out McLuhan in that list, but how are they important? They're obviously important. There's a lot of ways to read each of them, right? There's a lot more ways to read a theorist than there are to skin a cat. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, as they say, right? Well, obviously, I have my own priorities, and I have my own questions, and I also have my own general sort of habits. And so you're going to be getting a very McKerracherian approach to these theorists in particular, right? But there's also something very theory underground about the people being invited to give guest lectures and the actual subjects that they'll be lecturing on. Something very theory underground about that. And that's because in some way it actually relates to the whole. So I'll say a little bit about how Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Lacan, Bourdieu, Baudrillard, and Illich relate to the philosophy of stewardship once we go a little deeper into it, okay? I'll give a sort of speed run of how each one of those thinkers gives us something unique for thinking about stewardship. But first, I'm going to invite Anne up here, and we're going to read for you all from the opening of Leo Strauss's Xenophon's Socratic Discourse. which is this PDF I have pulled up here that I will share in the chat right now. And I said this before we started recording. It bears repeating. I'll just say this really quickly, that you could just find any other translation or edition of Xenophon's Oeconomicus, and that'll do. But the class, the class will be using this PDF in particular. You can use whichever one you please, but this one's nice because Strauss is sort of one of the formative voices, theorists, political philosophers, and professors of the 20th century. And he really likes Xenophon. And not a lot of people do. A lot of people have this special love for Xenophon. And so this book, which is called Xenophon's Socratic Discourse, actually has an original interpretation of the Oeconomicus that I would say is not super different in any obvious way from any of the other translations that I looked at. For people who are big fans of Greek and thinking deeply about translation, I look forward to hearing why you do or do not agree with that, especially if you happen to be a Straussian. Then I'm very curious. Though, of course, I can't really trust anything you say because you're a Straussian. So it's kind of just how it is. Hi, Anne.
Hi.
Awesome. Are you ready to do this?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the PDF right now.
Sweet.
Yeah, just let me know where we're starting.
So it's on page, it looks like 22 of the PDF.
Of the PDF? Okay.
Of the PDF, yeah. The actual book would be page 3.
Okay.
And I like how this starts so abruptly. And it's like, it starts out with, I once heard him discourse on the management of the household as well, in about these words. Tell me, Critobulus, he said, is management of the household the name of a certain kind of knowledge, as medicine, smithing, and carpentry are? And then Anne will be Critobulus.
Okay. Nice. It seems so to me, at least, said Critobulus.
Then just as we are at no loss to say what the work of each of these arts is, can we also say what the work of household management is?
It seems at any rate, said Critobulus, that it is the part of a good household manager to manage his own household well.
But if someone were to entrust another's household to him, said Socrates, could he not manage that if he wanted to, as well as he does his own? For the one who knows carpentry can do equally for another what he does for himself, and so too, presumably, can the skilled household manager.
It seems so to me, at least, Socrates.
Is it possible then, said Socrates, for one who knows this art, even though he happens to have no wealth himself, to manage another's household, just as a builder can build another's house and earn pay for it?
Yes, by Zeus, and he would earn a lot of pay, said Critobulus, if on taking over he were able to do what's necessary and, in producing a surplus, increase the household.
But what, in our opinion, is a household? Is it just the house? Or is whatever one possesses outside the house also part of the household?
To me, at any rate, said Critobulus, it seems that whatever someone possesses is part of his household, even if it isn't in the same city as the possessor.
Don't some men possess enemies?
Yes, by Zeus, and some at least have a great many.
Shall we say the enemies are also their possessions?
But it would be ridiculous, said Critobulus, if the one who increases enemies could in addition earn pay for it.
Because of course it was our opinion that a man's household is whatever he possesses.
Yes, by Zeus, said Critobulus, at least if what he possesses is good, For whatever is bad by Zeus, I do not call a possession.
You then appear to call possessions whatever is beneficial to each.
Very much so, he said, and whatever is harmful I hold to be loss rather than wealth.
If therefore someone buys a horse he doesn't know how to use and hurts himself in a fall, the horse isn't wealth for him?
No, not at least if wealth isn't good.
Then not even the earth is wealth for the human being who works it in such a way as to suffer loss in working it?
No, the earth isn't wealth either if it brings hardship instead of nourishment.
And isn't it the same with sheep? If someone suffers loss through not knowing how to use them, the sheep aren't wealth for him?
It seems so to me, at least.
You then, as it appears, believe that whatever benefits is wealth, while whatever harms is not.
Just so.
Then the same things are wealth for the one knowing how to use each of them, and not wealth for the one not knowing how, just as flutes are wealth for the one knowing how to play the flute in a manner worth mentioning, while the one not knowing how they are nothing more than useless stones, as long as it doesn't sell them. And thus it looks to us as though the flutes are wealth for those not knowing how to use them only when they sell them, and not when they don't sell them, but keep them in their possession.
Neither of us can disagree with this argument, Socrates, since it was said that whatever is beneficial is wealth. So unsold flutes are not wealth, for they aren't useful, but sold ones are wealth.
To this Socrates said, at least if he knows how to sell. For should he sell them and in turn receive something he didn't know how to use, they wouldn't be wealth even when sold, at least according to your argument.
You appear to be saying, Socrates, that not even money is wealth if one doesn't know how to use it.
And you seem to me to agree that whatever can benefit someone is wealth. Well, what if someone were to use his money to buy a prostitute, and through her he became worse in body, worse in soul, and worse in regard to his household? In what way would the money still be beneficial to him?
In no way, unless, of course, we are going to say that the so-called pig bean, which brings madness to all who eat of it, is wealth.
Oh my God. He just called a prostitute a pig bean. Then unless one knows how to use money, let him thrust it so far away, Critobulus, that it isn't even wealth. As for friends, if one knows how to use them so as to be benefited by them, what shall we assert they are?
Wealth by Zeus, said Critobulus, and worth much more than oxen, if indeed they are more beneficial than oxen.
Then enemies too are wealth, at least according to your argument, for whoever is able to benefit from them. Oh, no, sorry, I misread that. So it would be, then enemies too are wealth, at least according to your argument, for whoever is able to benefit them anyways.
Mm-hmm. It seems so to me, at any rate.
It is the part of a good household manager, therefore, to know how to use enemies so as to benefit from enemies.
Most emphatically.
And of course you see, Critobulus, he said, how many households of private men have been increased through war, and how many through tyrannies.
These things seem to me finely spoken, Socrates, said Critobulus. But what does it look like to us when we see some who have both the kinds of knowledge and the resources which they might put to work to increase their households, and we perceive that they're unwilling to do it, and see that as a result, their knowledge is of no benefit to them? What else than that for them the kinds of knowledge are not wealth, neither are the possessions?
It is slaves, Critobulus, said Socrates, you are attempting to discuss with me?
No, by Zeus, he said, not I, but rather men of whom some, at least, are reputed to be very well born. Some of these I see have the kinds of knowledge that belong to war others those that belong to peace, yet they are unwilling to put them to work. I suppose for this reason that they do not have masters.
And how is it they have no masters, said Socrates, if in spite of the fact that they pray for happiness and want to do the things from which good will result for them, they are nevertheless prevented from doing so by the rulers?
And just who are these invisible rulers of theirs, said Critobulus.
But by Zeus, said Socrates, they're not invisible at all, but rather quite manifest. And surely it doesn't escape your notice that they are most wicked. That is, if you hold that inactivity and softness of soul and neglect are wicked. And there are other deceiving mistresses pretending to be pleasures, dice playing and human associations without benefit, which in time become obvious even to the deceived as pains with a mere gloss of pleasure, and which, when they are in control, keep men from beneficial works.
But others, Socrates, he said, are not prevented from working by these things. On the contrary, they apply themselves quite vigorously to their work and to devising means of income. And yet at the same time, they deplete the households and are continually without means.
These too are slaves, said Socrates, and slaves indeed to harsh masters, such as gluttony, some to lust, some to drunkenness, some to foolish and expensive ambitions, all of which rule the human beings they control so harshly as to compel them, while they see them in their prime and capable of working, to spend on their desires whatever they may gain from their work. And when their masters perceive that they are no longer capable of working due to age, they abandon them to grow old miserably and attempt to use others in turn as slaves. It is no less necessary, Critobulus, to fight for freedom against them than against those who attempt to enslave by arms. Enemies, when they are gentlemen and have enslaved others, have in fact compelled many to become better by moderating them and have made them live in greater ease in the time remaining to them. But these mistresses never cease to plague the bodies, the souls, and the households of human beings as long as they rule over them. Everyone put your hands together to thank the readers, in this case, the guest. Anne, thank you so much for being Critobulus today. I hope that everybody else felt how fun that was. I don't know if it seemed fun to me. I didn't want to stop. I think initially we were going to do probably half as much of that, but I'm glad we got as far as we did. Because
yeah, I really recommend reading this, even like getting a friend or a spouse or a partner to like read it out loud. There's just something so fun about these ancient Greek dialogues, especially like Dave and I read some Plato together in the past, and just the way they banter is just kind of charming. By Zeus? Why, yes. But what do you mean? Especially if you read it like that. It actually is like a fun time to read, not just like, oh, I'm reading some difficult. This is difficult. You kind of have to go, wait, what did they just say? But you can make it a fun family activity.
Thank you. And I plan on doing plenty more of that with you all over the next year when it comes to reading these dialogues. Something that I actually signed up for is Samuel Loncar's Plato lecture that he gives every week. So you can also sign up for that by becoming an annual subscriber to his Substack, and then you can access it on Sundays, which is conveniently timed after things that I do on Sunday. But he's doing a whole year of Plato. By the time he's done with the year, they will have done every one of Plato's dialogues. And it's only about 50 pages of reading per week. But, you know, now that I've made that little plug for Samuel, and also stay tuned, I'll be making an announcement about something he'll be teaching soon at TU. I want to turn my focus now to Xenophon and Socrates and stewardship. Okay. I did not give a historical context for Xenophon. I kind of wanted to just throw you guys into it in this sort of abrupt way that it starts. Notice it starts so abruptly, they assume you know, or that Xenophon assumes you already know who he's speaking about, you know, referring to him as a him as opposed to Socrates. He's like, we also heard him talking about this, which makes us wonder if this is a fragment. This is wholesome theory, of course. The historical context question, though, raises itself about whether this dialogue actually happened. Because Xenophon loved Socrates, and like Plato, writes about Socrates in the wake of his execution. This is something that is considered by Leo Strauss. How much of this is meant to show the Athenian people Socrates was a good guy. He cared about things that everyone should care about, right? He was not corrupting the youth. He was trying to tell us how to be good stewards. And in particular, we have to think about who's talking. Critobulus, if indeed that is how you pronounce his name, I don't actually know, but like Critobulus is the son of this other guy who will appear later. Now, this other guy is someone that Socrates owes favors, and vice versa. And so there's actually this interesting sort of contextual question about, is Socrates engaging Critobulus on this particular issue because he's trying to do a favor for Critobulus's dad, because Critobulus has been kind of being a fuckboy. He's been running amok. He's not been minding his affairs in a responsible way. He's been gambling at the races. He's been making all kinds of expensive sacrifices to please the gods. He's been gifting lots of things to friends who are not really friends. Socrates will call him out for this and say, I don't envy you at all, Critobulus, because if you were to stop making those sacrifices and gifting things to those friends, you would like lose everything like overnight. Whereas me, because I have less than 100% of like what you have, because he's like a super rich guy, Critobulus, he's saying, if I were to lose everything, like people already don't expect much from me, and I'd still be able to call on favors from my friends. I wouldn't even lose my friends. You, on the other hand, you'd lose your friends. I'm not jealous of you at all. Right? And Critobulus is like, by Zeus, you're right. What am I to do? You know, and so he gets him interested in the idea of living a noble, virtuous life. Okay, you know, whether this is a favor Socrates is doing for his friends or not, like that is kind of beside the point for us right now. What I want to turn it to is the question of, if you own a horse and you don't know how to use it, and then you get hurt trying to ride it, is it still wealth? And then let's just say that you decide you don't want to learn how to ride the horse, and so you sell it. If what you sell it for gets replaced by something else that is harmful or not good for you and your loved ones, was it wealth? If it brings harm on you, it's not really wealth, is it? So you could own $100 million, but if you don't know how to use $100 million, it's just going to harm you, right? Like that's the sort of idea here. And the way that it relates to stewardship in particular is what I wanted to dive into here with you all. But in particular, I want to bring it back to Marx, Heidegger, etc. I said I was going to give you all a quick speed run of how these theorists relate. Marx is the thinker of the commodity form. What makes a commodity as opposed to a pure use value? Well, in the most simplistic sense, a pure use value is something that's just going to be immediately useful, or it makes some kind of affordance in your life, right? You might, I have a drill. I buy a drill. I might not be using the drill immediately, but it affords all kinds of things that I can do now around the house. It's an affordance, right? Well, a commodity, though it can be a use value, has a primary sort of telos towards exchange value. This is really just the first 3 chapters of Volume 1 of Das Kapital. What makes a commodity is that it is universally exchangeable and measured in relation to socially necessary labor. The average amount of labor necessary for making it has something to do with its value. Now, of course, supply and demand kick in and things get a lot more complicated in the later chapters and then actual volumes of Das Kapital, because we're really starting from a sort of abstraction and then we ground it out later. It gets more grounded out in relation to the real economy later. It starts as a kind of idealization, though. You start with a commodity. And what is unique about that commodity? Well, there's several things. And what I want to focus in on for now is that, one, exchange value, what it's worth, supersedes or takes over use value. And that means that the production of the commodity is oriented towards exchange and universal exchangeability as opposed to your particular use. It's oriented towards averages. Let's ground this out in something that's just commonsensical, and that this will really get the point across. The domos, the domestic sphere, the dwelling, the home. In Heidegger on thinking, on thinking something dwelling, but often it just gets referred to as on dwelling. It talks about a way of being in the world that is in relation to the domos, basically, really, but not just that, but also the habitat and like kind of the local, the where one lives and the way that one relates to it, right? Which is like this extreme opposite of this sort of gentrification of the city or the suburb. And what does gentrification do? I'm only using that word because it's a bit of a buzzword that people might be familiar with. It really is just getting at the idea that everything solid is melting into air, as Marx puts it in the manifesto. Everything solid is being melted into air because the who and the where matter less and less than the exchange value of the what. The where and the who matter less than the what and its exchangeability, and thus everything melts into air. There are no more blockbusters. Blockbusters were a very important thing for millennials. They grounded us out in our social relations. There were people that we saw at the Blockbuster. There were people that we associated with. There was a whole perusing the DVD or before that VHS sections and like really looking at things and thinking about things and talking to people about them and then renting them and then taking them home and then putting them in. And it was like a communal sort of ritual, right? And of course, that's just gone, melted into air, because exchange value for platform capitalism, specifically Netflix, Hulu, etc., matters more than the idea that we have like these sort of life world staple sort of places that we can go. Even the mall, which had replaced third places, genuine third places, even the mall now is for the most part replaced by Amazon. The commodification of the life world then has to do with everything being rendered exchangeable and bringing it back to the domos, domestic sphere, the habitat. What we're talking about is with a house, the home being reduced to a house. Now, home is where the heart is, and maybe you can make your home under a bridge, right? There's that possibility, and people make that argument. But there's also something about a home as opposed to a house that also has something to do with use value. If you live in a house that is not useful, is it wealth? No. Houses have been reduced to capital as opposed to a use value. Think about it. If you're renting a place, are you able to just put shelves wherever you want? Are you able to knock out a wall and build an extra room? Are you able to say, we're going to put a pantry here, we're going to add this little bit of a wall here? No, you're not able to make adjustments. That would be way too arduous. And you can if you get permission from the landlord. Okay, but the reason that they don't want you making these kinds of adjustments, obviously, is because we have to keep the exchange value of this up so that you are replaceable. In the same way, if your parents are thinking about the real estate value of the house that you live in, there's all kinds of stuff that that they're probably going to discourage you from doing, such as painting the walls in your bedroom whatever color you want, such as putting a little cat door out through the window into a tunnel system that goes up and around the house into a bunch of different levels for the cats to climb out and go around in a catio. Catios are discouraged for people who are not homeowners or for people who are prioritizing the exchange value of their house. Because if you decide that you want to sell it, you're gonna have to tear that all down and you're gonna have to repaint things and it's just big pain in the butt. You're living there with an eye towards escape. You're living there with an eye towards exchange value. You're living there with an eye towards the market as opposed to an eye towards use value. And something that you will find later on in Xenophon's Oikonomicus is this really wholesome conversation, unless you're too much of a feminist. If there's a certain kind of feminist that might not find it wholesome at all, though I think most people will still find it wholesome, where Socrates sort of deferring to his wife who's not present and saying, well, you really want to talk to her about how to run a household. She knows much more than me. But, for now, I'll just tell you about this conversation I had with this gentleman. And I asked him all about how he runs his household. And then as he's relaying that story, he starts also relaying this conversation that he had with that guy, where that guy's now telling a story about how he had a conversation with his wife where he couldn't find a tool, something was missing, it was out of place. And instead of like getting angry with his wife, he was like, oh, it's my fault. I never explained to her about like the rooms of the house and how there's different rooms for different things and everything has its proper place. Now I've got to take her around and show her and kind of like explain to her like the sort of philosophy of like how I've arranged my house. And he gets her on board and she gets really excited about it. Right? And part of it's like, is it not pleasing to the eye to see a thing where it belongs? Is it not pleasing? Is it not satisfying to see that a thing fits perfectly somewhere? And this guy, he takes his wife and he says, you see this room? You see the way it's set up here? What does this invite? What does this invite? What kind of thing has its proper place here? Everything about that gentleman's house was built with an eye towards not the market, not exchangeability, not replaceability, not being melted into air, not being liquidated, right? But instead, use value, true wealth. True wealth is not, I own a house that is worth $100,000 or nowadays like $1 million. What I own is something that I know how to use and it's useful to me. So that, I use Marx here to springboard then into Heidegger, whose Being and Time develops concepts you might be familiar with, readiness to hand and presence at hand. And basically, like the way that things look, that's present at hand. You can analyze them and try to describe them. That's presence at hand. Whereas the more primordial relation we have to the things would be readiness to hand. Is it handy? Is it useful? Right? If the drill that I referenced earlier is to be useful for me, I'm not going to be able to, it's not actually going to be useful if I keep it somewhere that's like not accessible. Right? It needs to be accessible. It needs to be easy to find. It needs to be able to use when I'm doing projects, right? So accessibility, you need to know where it is. You need to be able to grab it and use it as a part of second nature. Second nature use value is kind of what we're getting at with readiness to hand in being in time. Right. Now I'm going to skip ahead a bunch of theorists and go straight to Baudrillard, okay? Because I'm not going to like belabor my point about, Levinas and Lacan and Bourdieu. I will be doing that throughout the year of 2026. You will see the ways that they relate to this. But I also want to skip ahead to Baudrillard to say that when sign value has become more important than exchange value, we enter a new era of capitalism. And it's one we have to be realists about. When sign value is more important than exchange value, because exchange value is based in sign value, which is to say the way that things appear, then something very important happens in the domos. It means that instead of things being present at hand, viewable, objective, describable, because they've been placed there to be intuitively ready to hand, now when they're present at hand, they're really present at hand to convey something about your personality, your identity, or the market value. And a perfect example would be nothing that we bring into the house on a regular basis actually has a proper place where it belongs, but the china in the china cabinet is being featured prominently. It has its place where it belongs, but it's not useful. We don't actually ever get it out and use it. It's for sign value only. The china in the china cabinet is for sign value only, not useful, not ready to hand. In this case, the present at hand has been broken from its readiness to hand. In the previous case, something being made, like the drill or the hammer being made presentable in a nice, orderly way, it's useful. Its presencing is on the basis of its readiness to actual use value. But now it's about presence for the sake of sign value, for the sake of exchange value, prior to any sort of reference to use value. I've taken you from Marx through Heidegger to Baudrillard. And this is kind of what I'm driving at, that we can do this kind of thing, and that this obviously relates to our lives. Now, as far as black pills go, there's a lot of reasons to be black pilled about the world that we live in, right? A lot of reasons that we got into here. Well, a couple of the ones that have been really big for me have to do with, let me pull it up here, what can be sort of broadly referred to as the PCFM, or the post-class fractured mass. I'm realizing that this thesis doesn't really matter to people who haven't spent some serious time thinking about Marx, right? And so it's actually like a sort of niche argument I've had with Marxists, as opposed to the broader theory scene. Of course, any theorist doing critical social theory, if they were canon literate, would know that everything that they do is in reference to Marx anyway. But that's not the reality in which we live, is it? But there were specific things about the PCFM pill that I want to touch on here. One big one, obviously, is just the structural stultification of time energy. We do not have T3 institutions where we have the time energy to explore and develop our own capacities, talents, with tutors or tutelage or teachers, right? We don't have that. We also don't have the ability to nurture the nature and natality of others, whether they be our children or our students, due to the structural stultification of time energy, which is to say its reduction to labor power, as opposed to protecting it at all costs from a preoccupation with necessity, and instead freeing it into a space of skole, the root word of school, the root word of scholar, the root word of scholastic, skole. So structural stultification, right? But more often when I talk about the PCFM pill, I am talking about either this attunement gerrymandering, the medium, or the professional managerialization of schooling. With the medium, it opens this whole thing to too much information being blasted at us all the time, and this fear of missing out, TMI plus FOMO, resulting in ADHD, friction-free comfort, gerrymandered drive, me, faster, faster, faster. What I just did was I touched on 8 different theorists and 2 years of critical media theory in a soundbite. So, take that as you will, with a lot of grains of salt as to what it means, unless you've done all that work. The PMC schooling thing, though, is just to say that education and lifelong learning is a lot less what it's about, or the kind of education and lifelong learning that it's about is about being sorted into your proper place and enforcing that place, reinforcing the relations of production, right? It's meritocracy, right? It's all about that. And it's all about people pleasing and being a teacher's pet and being a hall monitor, or being a rebel who's being chewed up and spat out by that system, and now you don't deserve anything. Like this sort of meritocracy thing is part of what's being trained. It's also a certain relation to authority figures is what's being trained. It's the reinforcement and projection of a certain kind of bell curve that you are supposed to play into, as opposed to a sort of bespoke cultivation that you would be guaranteed if you were someone who was born into a family like Winston Churchill or FDR. Like either of these guys, I like to look at them because they belong to a time when education had nothing to do with what it has become. It was about the cultivation of a kind of character. That's what it was about. And if you were falling behind, you were put in a remedial class of other people who had behavioral problems or whatever. No, you had a tutor who worked with you on this subject. And they worked with you where you're at. You weren't one of 25 people, right? You weren't sent to a school for losers, right? Right. So the PMC schooling thing is part of the PCFM pill, and it relates to the medium because, as Neil Postman shows, the school is a medium. It is a medium. And that is to say, it has a lot to do with the formation of your libidinal economy and how that's going to interface with the relations of production, which is important in light of what we just read from Xenophon, because the slavery that is less obvious is not the kind that comes from force, but is the kind that comes from desire. Gluttony makes us into slaves. Greed makes us into slaves. This idea that you can be made a slave to pornography is something that I think resonates with a lot of people these days. This idea that you can be a slave to the impulses to whip out the phone and look at things just to escape any form of discomfort or boredom, right? Of course this makes sense. And that's a much more pernicious form of slavery in the sense that it's invisible, right? That's why Critobulus was like, who are these invisible masters? And Socrates is like, they're not invisible at all, man. They're in your face every day. I mean, especially because this is a guy who's blowing his fortune, living extremely irresponsibly, making superficial relationships by buying people gifts all the time, trying to please the gods with sacrifices as opposed to actions. Yeah, it's a form of slavery. Well, if what we're being taught are to be worker consumers, on the worker side, there's obviously the slavery of not developing your talents, your capacities, your potential in any sort of a meaningful way where you take ownership over it. And then on the consumer side, because it's all about your identity, being in relation to the games that you play, or being in relation to the books that you read. I mean, really, no one reads, but being in relation to the things that you consume. This is also a form of slavery, but it's the slavery of desire. And it's much less obvious because people think that they're their freest when they're being their consumer selves. This is why people spend so much time telling you about their taskmasters, which is to say their tastes. People love to tell you about their slave owners, which is to say their tastes. Right? That's what I hear when I hear someone go way too deep into their consumer idiosyncrasies. Like, yeah, I like my coffee to be over a certain amount of degrees or I'll spit it out and want more coffee. Isn't that interesting? And I don't like it with cream. Ooh, isn't that so cool? That's something about me. That's who I am. I have these consumer tastes. Let's talk more about the things that we like to consume. I like a certain style. I like to do my hair a certain way. I like to wear my hat a certain way. This one day I had this deep realization that I actually do like licorice. This is me telling you about my taskmasters and taking pride in it. I'm saying, look at these people who own me. Except they're not people, of course, they're corporations that step in to mediate that desire. But the desire itself and the degree to which we lose the ability to control our impulses, that itself is the issue. And it's a terrible, terrible issue. It's one that people struggle with every day. What does this actually have to do with philosophy and theory and large-scale structural change? No, this just has to do with being a person. This just has to do with being a person, which philosophy is about. Philosophy is about a way of life. And it's not just about challenging ideology or doing ideology critique. Philosophy is about a virtuous life that concerns itself with the question of the good, the true, the beautiful, the just. And justice has something very intimately to do with the way that we balance out our drives, our desires, and our passions. Justice and how we actually balance those things off against who's in control here, who's really in control here. Is it the rational higher self? Is it in control, or is it the desires, the passions? Is actually the springboard from which Plato's Socrates takes us into the Republic. You only do the political side of Plato's Republic as a way of relating back to the individual and the way that we balance ourselves out. You yourself are a government. You yourself are a state. Who's running the show? Who's running the show? You're not one, you're many. Who's running the show? That is the theme there, from this position that I take. Obviously, I have my motives for reading things the way that I read things. But when I'm thinking about large-scale structural change and the black pill of the facts of the structural stultification of our time energy, the PMC schooling system, and our addiction to the media, the medium that mediates our experience, and how all of these things tie up in a sort of defeating knot that sort of forecloses our horizon of possibility, especially on the basis of the way that our modes of attunement get gerrymandered after and through all of that division. There's good reasons to not have any sort of faith that any existing movement or party has a hope of large-scale structural change. And we take it even further. Benjamin's seminar was fantastic for laying out, I think 6 fundamental schisms, right? Fundamental schisms that involve things like being a practical, pragmatic kind of oriented person who's really driven by certain forms of fear that included death and dishonor, right? Or are we talking about being, as opposed to being the sort of pragmatic person, are you more ideal driven and abstract? And then, of course, there's or I think he also talked about, being intrinsically motivated versus being extrinsically motivated. Like these are fundamental schisms for people and for groups. Yeah, I got a thumbs up from Benjamin. Okay, good. Well, you know, obviously these cash out in a variety of ways, and immigration versus borders would be a huge one. But that also relates to a fundamental mode of attunement. You know, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, it's about a fundamental openness towards others that would prioritize compassion and change, versus a mode of attunement that would prioritize security. Security, which would want to impose borders, which would want to still have police, which would still care about these things because you care about not just yourself, care about your family, care about your loved ones. It's not about not having compassion. It's just about compassion not being as big a priority as security. But the side of borders and police is the side of prohibition and the no of the father, to put it like a Lacanian. And the side of openness to the other and compassion, it would prioritize equality. This is the yes, the welcoming embrace of the mother. Bring it in, folks. How can we help? Versus like, I don't know about that. We're gonna have to check you out. It's gonna be a while before we accept you. Okay. I just put out the game plan, a piece on the Substack, the Theory Underground Substack. It's also been read now on the channel by David Ruiz for the Audible version of Underground Theory Volume 2. So if you have a copy of Underground Theory Volume 2, then you can read it there. And it's a sort of futurist manifesto. And I know that's like a sort of audacious or hubristic sounding thing to say. I don't take it too seriously, but the part of it that I really do take seriously is this Society of Divorce thesis. It took World Wars I and II, but even before that, perhaps the Civil War, to really break people and to really individualize people and to set the conditions for what Christopher Lasch calls the culture of narcissism. But even if you just compare the world of Edward Bernays to the world of Noam Chomsky, it becomes painstakingly clear that the civic infrastructure that you were able to kind of take for granted as an Edward Bernays is gone by the time we're talking about Joe Sixpack on the couch. Because the civic man of Edward Bernays' time was involved in like 12 different associations and went to all these different meetings. You know, the town council was just one of them. The Masonic Lodge or the KKK. these were just one of them, right? Like the fact is like your average person in America, well, first of all, wasn't KKK. Let's be honest. The average was not even close to that. But the point is that these kinds of associations, and I bring that one up because Bernays does mention it as one that people are associated with as just something. But the point is that the civic man was involved in like, you know, 12 to 25 different civic associations, and you had weekly meetings and you had monthly meetings and you had quarterly meetings and you had annual meetings. That's a lot of ways of engaging with actual other people in embodied spaces, right? As opposed to Joe Sixpack isolated in front of what McLuhan optimistically called the global village, being a television, which I think his disciple, who kind of goes way beyond him, Neil Postman, instead refers to not as the global village, but as amusing ourselves to death. Or you know, the other guy, he wrote the book around the same time. I refer to it way less frequently, and I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. You probably know who I'm talking about, but he wrote Bowling Alone. And then there's a more recent book that kind of does this, where it's like, it's about the back porch as opposed to the front porch, and how houses have started doing like the back patio as opposed to the front porch. Like streets are not made to sit out facing, you know, going back to the exchangeability and commodification of housing, making the domos unlivable and non-useful. right? But as far as this attunement gerrymandering thing goes, when I'm talking about immigration versus borders, or affirming versus prohibiting, this sort of society of divorce where the feminine is fundamentally opposed to the masculine, and these are made to feel mutually exclusive, even though of course they're not, right? That's why non-binary makes sense. You know, non-binary makes sense in a context where the masculine and feminine have been put at odds against each other and turned into stupid and mean cartoons that you are supposed to relate to and take a side with against the other. Mama says, come with me. Daddy says, no, come with me. You either live a life that is in fidelity to basically a whole rule system that prohibits all kinds of stuff, or you go along with the uber permissive approach that wants you to be your best self and just kind of do whatever feels right. And both of these sides require the other to be its worst possible version. The cultural left is reliant on the cultural right being its worst possible version. Both sides get off on it, and their checks are literally cut by the other side being hyperbolically evil and cartoonishly alien. The situation in which we find ourselves is where ICE abducts people off of the streets without badges or warrants, wearing masks. And if you're not for that, then you're going to have to probably work with the people who are castrating 7-year-olds. Okay? So it's like, you know, why? Because we want to affirm their identity so much that we fall into the trap of the pharmaceutical, psychiatric, and surgical industries working together to guinea pig working class kids and tell them that the solution to all their problems are a lifelong regimen of pharmaceuticals and certain adjustments made to their bodies that include, but are not limited to, the irreparable harm of castration. Okay? It's either that or the disciplinary repressive state apparatus and sort of bootlicking for it. Like, we really are in a very strange situation. If you're not bought into either side 100%, and you just kind of like look back and forth, you just see extremes all the time. And the reason you see the extremes all the time is because both sides rely on you only seeing the extremes of the other side. The extreme stupidity, the extreme evil, right? So unless you yourself are super totalized in an extremely gerrymandered little niche of one of the sides of the duopoly, you're going to be kind of looking back and forth going, what the hell is going on now? I have to choose a side between these two. I would prefer not to. And I would prefer not to on the basis of the duopoly is what I kind of take to be a fundamental axiom of what I have taken to calling recently post-duopoly theory, post-duopoly critique, or I mean, in the case of when people say, so what are you, post-left? I say, no, I'm post-duopoly. I'm just post-duopoly. I'm sorry. That's not a left or right thing. It's I'm sick of them both being reliant on the other side being the worst possible version of itself, and then playing the worst possible version of itself as a way to trigger the other side. Like when Antifa gets especially outrageous, they're doing it to trigger the right, and they get off on it, and vice versa. Oh, thanks, Luke. It's Putnam. That's right. For bowling alone. Right. So this attunement gerrymandering and this medium thing and this PMC school thing and all of this stuff kind of relates to this big black pill that I took 5 years ago when I would have considered myself post-left. I was making my exit. I did a very brash thing and said, my number one source of income, I'm willing to kiss it goodbye because I don't want to be reliant on sort of leftist Patreon cutting my checks. I don't want to be an influencer. I don't want to be accountable to this audience anymore because I tried, and I felt like I was becoming captured. Being captured by that audience meant in part that I was capitulating to and pandering to a lesser other, not a big other, a lesser other. I was setting myself up as a default, more mature kind of person who could guide the left in a more positive direction. It's what we were all doing with BreadTube back then. We were all assuming a lesser other, a dumber, younger kind of self that we could guide towards something better. And so it's a very easy position from which to kind of just celebrate oneself being much further ahead, obviously. So it plays into ressentiment. But also, if you're always, kind of speaking to a lower common denominator, then you're not really raising yourself up, are you? The measure against which you rise has been, it's actually down here now. You don't have to do much to uplift from that level. Audience capture became a really big issue, but so did academic capture and keeping my discourse within the sort of parameters of academic spaces, right? And so academic capture, attention economy capture, I didn't like it. I wanted free of these things, and I chose to work at Amazon, even though I had a master's. As opposed, I chose to work at Amazon in spite of having a master's and a growing, successful YouTube channel. And I took a huge loss in income, and I didn't mind one bit because I felt so much more free, and that was very important to me. Still is. Still is. Freedom from capture is something I think a lot of people are becoming more interested in. And as we approach the close of this lecture and move towards a sort of Q&A where I'm excited to hear anybody's thoughts. The point is that the germ or gestile or like baby version of the PCFM pill that I was feeling in the pit of my stomach, but that I had not really formulated very well yet. I was referring to that gerrymandering as psychological gerrymandering because I was thinking that it's done on the basis of personality types to a large extent. So I wasn't thinking at the level of Befindlichkeit or Heideggerian attunement. But really, all of that stuff was there. I was openly streaming about it, and I was coming to realizations about it. And what it led to was saying, I give up. I give up. I give up on all of this. But the way that I stayed optimistic, I would say, is just that I bought myself time in a sort of sense to say, I don't wholly give up. I just give up on people who actually exist. So there's no hope for any of us. There's no hope for you. There's no hope for me. There's no hope on anyone that we know. But I did not, at the same time, do the thing that we just touched on earlier in Benjamin's seminar about this sort of like, oh, the kids will save us. The kids will save us. Remember when Bill Ayers does that at the Platypus Convention on the panel with me, he basically says the kids will be our salvation. Just look to the kids. Look to the kids these days. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's been the solution for since the 70s, since you guys talked about it in the Weather Underground Manifesto. How are you still putting hope in the children? The children are worse all the time. What are you talking about? So I wasn't putting my hope in the abstraction called children, but specifically this. For the last 100 years now, the overwhelming tendency has been to center kids, specifically college students. I mean, this is especially true in the 60s and since then. So that's less than 100 years, but really the general thing is there's this new lifeblood coming in from these students. We have to appeal to these students. And that was never mutually exclusive to or with the parents. But somewhere along the way, it sort of seems like it did become mutually exclusive to the idea of a functioning family with parents who actually show up and care about their kids. Right? And insofar as that has been prioritized or centered by anybody, it was pretty much done by Ronald Reagan. And since then, the conservative right in America that speaks to and centers family values, to the point now where people actually get triggered when you bring up family values. It's like, well, okay, but what are family values? There's all kinds of things that are family values. Every single one of the things that you can possibly think of under the broader heading, stewardship and home economics, actually also gets at family values. It's just not this kind of co-opted form of it that has become politicized. So I'm not using buzzwords that will trigger people when I say stewardship and home economics. And at the same time, there's other important things that kind of get included by this broader header that would include stuff like finance, personal finance, or microeconomics. Okay, yeah, but as Samuel Longcar recently pointed out, what he likes about this way of saying it or framing it is that stuff's included in home economics. But that stuff, like personal finances without home economics in this broader, more philosophically based way, stupid. And it's not going to show you anything about what it means to be successful, right? So yeah, my big thing with the black pill was to say, I'm going to give myself time to develop, but my real audience in the future is going to be parents. My real audience in the future is going to be parents who are living deliberately, right? Living deliberately. That doesn't necessarily mean they're homesteading or homeschooling at all, right? They could be living in cities, but if they're deliberate parents, the chances are they do care about after school. They might not be homeschooling, but they at least care about after school, which is taking a vested interest in your kid's development, taking a vested interest in that. And something that's very near and dear to me, I'll just kind of let you all in on a secret here, is that my biggest issue with homeschool, if you read the last chapter of Timenergy, my biggest issue with homeschool is that people tend to impose the worst aspects of the schooling system into the household. But not only that, it's really hard for a mom who's doing everything, and it usually is a mom. It's really, really hard for a mom who's doing everything to stay inspired. And a teacher who's also kind of the principal, who's not inspired, is not going to inspire much from the students. And everything just becomes homework all the time. And let's just say that your kid's falling behind in math, and so you're trying to do after-school activities with them. You're like this busy dad. You're trying to do math with your kid at the end of the day. That's not the same thing as like being inspired by these things. That's not the same thing as like caring about these things. When Hegel went and taught high schoolers, which he did for a long time, or when Wittgenstein went and taught elementary school kids, in both cases, they were already super interested in everything because they cared about philosophy, and philosophy cares about everything. Philosophy cares about the whole. And for these thinkers who thought deeply about the whole and how everything fits together, what an honor, what a privilege, what a special opportunity to get to ground out in the basics of elementary or high school. If you care about the whole, then teaching a mathematical equation is awesome. If you care about the whole, literally anything you could possibly be teaching either is awesome or they're probably just in a bad curriculum. But everything should be awesome because you care about understanding the whole. And if philosophy and theory don't make you care about the whole, if it doesn't actually make you care about how you live your life, about the kinds of relationships that you have, about the kinds of people, questions, and values that you prioritize, then what is it doing? What is it doing? And so, here I am in a cabin. Maybe you don't know this, but I'm in a cabin out in the woods, like 17 hours away from where I normally live with Anne. And I'm here with, a Google document in which I am writing a book, a whole bunch of sheets of paper upon which I'm writing a book. And it's this book that I promised I was going to write to the parents of the kids who'd be 25 and 30 years, 5 years ago. I gave myself this time to write this book to those parents. And now I'm realizing I have nothing to say to them. I have nothing to say to them. Because I'm not really a parent yet. You know, we've got one in the oven. And so like we're potential parents, we're parents in formation. But I don't have like the real knowledge or experience to get to kind of give parents. But what I can do is I can look around and I can say, look, whether you're a parent or not, whether you're going to be or not, it doesn't really matter. If you want to live deliberately, if you want to live longer term, and if you want to try to develop yourself with and around people who are not going to give in and fall under and just give up, and who are going to try to rise above the duopolistic framing of this left versus right game, this vicious cycle that everyone seems caught up in. If you want to rise above all of that and try to live a more balanced way, because potentially it's going to be something good in the future, or at least it'll be good now. In either case or both, then welcome. And I'm excited for this new year, and I'm really, really excited for Intro to Theory, and I'm especially excited for the philosophy of stewardship and home economics. Maybe in the Q&A we can say some stuff about the presentations, the practicum, the thesis, you know, etc., parts of the syllabus. But for now, I'll leave it at that. Thanks. Thank you for your little clapping emojis, everybody. Those are fun. They're all yellow, except I saw a white one. I saw some white ones. Funny. The yellow clapping emojis come from Lego figures, actually. Yeah. Just kidding. Anybody have anything, questions or comments or anything that they want to add here at the end?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I feel like I've talked a lot, but I just wanted to ask a little bit more about keeping that inspiration going while homeschooling, because I don't think I can subject my children to public school, but obviously I see a lot of pitfalls being an autodidact who mostly stays at home. So I just wondered if, obviously, y'all are yet to be parents, but if you had any thoughts about that, about how to not be solipsistic or not be working one out on your children when trying to provide them.
Hey, I think the microphone in relation to your mouth might have been in a non-optimal position. It was kind of hard to make out. I could take a stab at it, but also if it's just a simple thing you can change, then you could kind of try again. Did he just drop? He dropped. Okay. I'm going to bookmark that for when he returns because I definitely want to talk about it. I think I understand what he was getting at. Next.
Hello. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's much better.
Sorry, I had a Bluetooth malfunction. Yeah, so I'm thank you for your presentation, and also thanks for pointing out that the instructor has to be inspired if you want to be a homeschooler. I just have difficulty facing the possibility of having to send my children to public school since the state has degraded to such a degree. But also worried about being too like solipsistic or self-interested or just like working out my own problems with them. I think maybe a homeschool collective is a helpful like way out. I don't know if I can find one of those, but just wondered if I know y'all haven't yet gotten to that stage, but have you thought more about that in general?
Yeah, thanks, man. So the immediate answer is there are two kinds, broadly speaking, of homeschool collectives, and they're either evangelical or hippie, right? Both have their point. The evangelical side, it can have a little bit more of a classics approach, and probably the best version of that would be the less evangelical, more Catholic side, There's a lot of good Catholic cooperatives. And I've always thought that the best thing for my kid would be probably a Catholic school. That way they can rebel against the school instead of me, because I'm not a Catholic. And so, you know, ha. But yeah, you get the Catholic private school versus Catholic cooperative as a sort of most classics based one end of the spectrum. And on the other side, the more elite version of homeschool is going to be a lot more Montessori influenced, a lot more Montessori or Woolberg. In either of those cases, we're talking about something that's going to be a lot more progressive. And usually they don't care about the classics, really not in a serious way, which to me is problematic because I don't think that the classics are the be all end all, but they're a big part of everything. And if you're not learning to have base canon literacy and the confidence to dive into any text, your schooling system is just messing you up. And it's lying to you about what education actually is. And so, you know, there's a huge problem on the progressive side of this as well. But with that said, it's going to be radically idiosyncratic, singular, and bespoke wherever you live. There's just, you really want to find all the groups you possibly can and just start looking into them as soon as possible. And, you know, never think that you don't need a plan B, because you very well might need to put your kids into a regular institution for significant periods of their upbringing. You just have to. And it's for the reasons that you already touched on. It's also because you could be sick and dying. It's because your partner could be sick and dying. You never know. And so a sort of insurance policy against that is like to be like, look, the cooperative approach can always fall apart. The institution is always going to be plan B. And so you also want to have a foot in that world as well, you know, whatever that means. And so for me, that means like I want to be openly associating with teachers in local schools. I want to be openly associating with both hippie and evangelical homeschool cooperatives. And I want to really get to know who's who and what are they doing. And then with all that said, I think that something like Theory Underground can be the sort of meta that you need to stay inspired. It can be, but also it might not be. And you definitely need your plan Bs lined up. Plan B, plan C, plan D. Got to have a lot of backup plans. And is there anything that you want to add to that? Or anyone else, really, of course, anyone else. But Anne and I are just obviously thinking about it a lot lately. We used to have a couple people that were like really, really pro homeschool. And I would kind of like challenge it. I hate to leave the homeschool thing unchallenged when people just kind of take it to be the oh, it's the lesser evil, or it's just like it's morally superior in every way. It's just like it's really bad. It's like no, it's not. It's not so good, guys.
Yeah, I see so many dangers, and it's like the sociality, the lack of friction, possibly, maybe able to pay perfect attention to my baby. This sort of friction is necessary. Discomfort is necessary. Suffering is necessary. I guess, and definitely a grounding in the classics is like super important. I feel like, unfortunately, just the children of the PMC get that, but like you said, also they get the hand holding of the tutor to just meet them right where they are. So yeah, it's definitely a conundrum.
Right, and that's if even, because you know, as I discussed in the episode that went up yesterday or the day before with Benjamin on why left, you can be in a very well-funded sort of PMC school and still not know who the difference between Julius and Augustus Caesar is. Like, and that's just scratching the surface of how deep it goes. You know, no real history, no real sense for like who's gone before. Just like this story about like we were bad, we just keep getting better. I'm going to say a couple things about the syllabus here. And then if I'm talking and you realize what you wanted to talk about, go ahead and raise your hand. But for the time being, I'm going to click the share button and actually pull up the syllabus so that you're able to see it. And we're going to touch on a couple of things here. This will be made public on the Theory Underground YouTube channel. I'm not planning on editing anything. And so hello to the public side. And, if you, for instance, if Z, you don't want to be on the public side, you can always just ask me to edit it. But as far as, everyone else's contributions go, just remember, this is public facing. As the fine print when you sign up and become a member actually says, like, anything you say can just appear out on the internet. With that said, here it is, the philosophy of stewardship and household economics. Oh, and remember, on your way out, if you're about to leave, do email hello.theoryunderground@gmail.com if you want to be included in the document that's going to be going out here. The one that if you sign, you're going to get some early access to finding out all about the super secret project. Anyway, with that said, here's the document. It says this is a living document that is being actively edited. Take it as 80% there and subject to change. And so the philosophy of stewardship and household economics, based adulting 101, begins January 2025. It's the first Sunday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's because it is kind of like church to me. It's like civic church, like this approach to stewardship and home economics. That's really what it's about. The goal of the seminar is to encourage grounding oneself with oneself and one's loved ones in those aspects of life that are most pressing, immediate, or practical. This is the opposite of metaphysics, epistemology, or their critique. An operating assumption of this course, deconstruction or critical theory without construction and cultivation, are little more than post hoc rationalizations of arrested development. The opposite of arrested development is the deliberate and disciplined pursuit of mature activity, as in principle-grounded practice. But principles are not enough for proper grounding in our sense. We must do so while sinking deep roots into the canon, which is defined here as the argument about what voices from the past best speak to us still to this day. On the first Sunday of each month, David McKerracher will give a grounding talk on a particular theme related to this course. That will be preceded or followed by 1 to 2 shorter talks by other participants in the seminar. Seminar participants have a variety of ways to engage and contribute, from Q&As, discussion, presentations, practicums, as well as thesis, essay, or book projects. BIOP or BALO, BYOP or BALO. I like BYOP or BALO a lot more than BIOP or BALO. I don't like those nearly as much. Don't say them. Spell them out. BYOP stands for bring your own partner. It's like bring your own beer. It's bring your own partner. Whether she or he, but I will assume she, is into theory or philosophy or not, chances are this will be inherently interesting because it has to do with your cooperative life-building union. At the bare minimum, just relay some of your favorite passages from Xenophon's Oikonomicus. Take her out for coffee and share some notes. She's also welcome to listen to the recordings, attend and participate, or whatever. Just let her know she's welcome. It's a buy one, get one free if you've got a SO, significant other. Single? Perfect. Then BALO. Become a local organizer. You won't be for that long if you forget about dating and instead focus on making the most out of your life through this course. Singles will be especially encouraged to take on a local leadership role wherever they are, either in existing groups or to start your own experimental group as a part of this course. Examples of a local meetup you could organize. 1, a group founded on the idea of sober singles looking to get serious about life. 2, an after-school lifelong learning community in pursuit of canon literacy. 3, a weekly or monthly game night. 4, a film club. It could be that simple. You just watch movies. But the point is organize something. If you want help in any of the above endeavors, McKerracher has over 20 years of experience organizing such things. He can help you get whatever you want off the ground. Please shout out in the comments if you are interested in one of those or something like it. Practicum. And also, I don't know if Anne's still around, but I did want to call on her to share about her practicum. Oh, she did. Oh, no, she messaged me to say she had to pop off. Hey, are you able to share about your practicum? Okay, there we go. Sent. The practicum section of this course has to do with applied activity driven by the questions and topics of this course and of our inquiry. It can look like a lot of things, but we will in particular have special help from professional experts and craftsmen coaching us along our journeys with specific practical projects that are universally valuable human forms of knowledge, such as, and I'm going to go ahead and keep changing these bullet points to numbered items. 1, develop a household budget. 2, design blueprints for a farm or entire garden. We have somebody with over 30 years of experience and the certification of both the Master Gardener title as well as USDA certified organic, being my mother, who will be leading the design, this one in particular, which is designing blueprints for a garden or entire farm. A meal prep plan for an entire year. Something I'm very excited to do with you all, or at least to share with you all, because I'm going to be doing this. Craft blueprints for either your dream home or for your first home. My dad has over 30 years of experience. He's built his first home. He built a marketable, exchangeable real estate sort of home that he sold. And then he built his sort of magnum opus home. For those who came to the retreat, that's his magnum opus home. That home has very little to do with exchange value. He built things in a very inefficient way if you're thinking about exchangeability. That home is the perfect example of a pure use value that is bespoke as can be. Okay? He'll be talking about your first home or your dream home, how to blueprint it. If you guys know anything about these people who are really into the law of attraction and manifesting things, they like to make aphorisms or affirmations that they say in the mirror. They like to watch Tony Robbins. They like to make a vision board every year. Okay, what they don't tend to do, and I think this is a big critique of that entire side of the world, or side of the media bubble. What they don't tend to do is they don't actually craft blueprints for things. They want $1 million, but they don't have a business plan. They want a dream house, but they don't sit there and actually work out the blueprints for it and then think about how much it's going to cost to do this and to do that. This is way beyond what they call the law of attraction or intentionality, and has a lot more to do with like actually doing real world things and making it happen. The intention is an important first step. It's a baby step. There are so many steps past that. And drafting blueprints, if you're serious about having a house that is your own, that's a real one. And the value of this alone, or of the blueprints for the garden or farm, the value of that alone is thousands of dollars. You could go sign up for a course that would just focus on that practical thing, and it's going to be thousands of dollars. And then the result of that work is going to be immeasurable. Okay. So I'm very excited to be drafting the blueprints for my first home with Anne. As a part of this course, you'll all see the development of that. And then if you come out to the thing that we do in August at the or September, we're not sure yet, for the retreat, festival, whatever it's going to be, you'll actually see the thing that you saw blueprints for. You'll actually see it built, because we're doing it within a year. It'll be an idea in our heads. It'll be pen on paper. It'll be conversations. It'll be finding money somehow. And then it will be literally building. And it'll all be part of this. Finally, and this is Anne's, plan a set of interrelated systems that will help keep everything clean and organized. You can go many directions on any of these projects and keep it as small or large scale, ideal or beginner as you please. Examples: on the construction side of things, you can build anything really, like a birdhouse or catio. You could also design what you would build if you were given $40 million. On the gardening side, you might just decide to grow some wheatgrass, microgreens, plant some fruit trees, or learn how to bonsai. You may also design a global network of micro and mid-range farms. Just keep in mind, though, that the point of this practicum is to get real serious about the actual time energetic and financial costs of the project, thinking seriously about how to be a good steward of your resources. Thesis. And this one is something I'm really excited to do. The thesis section of this course has to do with developing an idea or argument that relates to or draws off of one or more of the texts from the course bibliography. A solid thesis illustrates familiarity with the relevant works that have made contributions to the space within which you intervene, while clarifying how your contribution differs from or adds to what's come before. With that said, this could take shape in multiple ways, such as 1, a traditional academic level thesis, 30 to 150 pages, depending on where you're at and with which you're dealing with, or with which you're dealing. 2, a theory memoir. 3, a theory fiction novella. 4, an experimental art project. One of my favorite examples being the dissertation comic book Unflattening by Nick Susanis. If you guys haven't got your hands on that, highly recommend it, especially for artists. He literally did his dissertation as a comic book, and it's awesome. Whether you put together a first draft or pour untold hours into the perfection of this work, you will have something to look back on, to measure your progress against, and most importantly, upon which to ground out your current philosophical trajectory. Presentation. Everyone is encouraged to sign up for a week to give a talk, which can be read aloud or given off the cuff with only a few bullet points. It doesn't matter. The main point of your talk is to share about one or more of the texts from the course bibliography. Everyone is encouraged to pick 1 or 2 texts per month that they will read and to pair up with others who might want to read the same text when possible. Alternatively, you are also encouraged to get together and swap notes about different texts with one another outside of class. Either way, it's not exactly a book report, but is meant to rather share something cool with fellow travelers so that they have more reason to read it on their own. I want to say that people who do this in a specific style that I will be unfolding for people who are tier 2 or higher subscribers are going to have an opportunity to win a prestigious position or title or inclusion in a certain list of people, meaning that your lecture or presentation might get listed alongside a bunch of other people who are really awesome professors. So you could appear as a guest lecturer in the about side of the Theory Underground website, which means that you would be listed alongside other notable names. And so this is a really good experience builder, and it's got a real potential for the kind of feedback that you can only get when you're going to be doing something like this, okay? Finally, publication. 2 to 3 of the best examples of each of the above will have the opportunity to get published, though in some cases they may still require a little more work. For example, if you have a great first draft of a thesis, then you will be given feedback with the next steps required before publication is possible. If you give a great talk, that might get published as is, or you will be given an opportunity to present again after working on certain aspects as suggested in the feedback. In a lot of cases, though, we tend to have a good enough mentality and are proud to present pieces with warts and all, as should be clear from Underground Theory Volumes 1 and 2. Keep in mind that the amount of feedback and support you get in terms of time energy from McKerracher are somewhat tied to the tier of your involvement. Tier 1 TU members get access to the course and are able to do any of the above projects, but the workshops for writing and speaking, as well as master's thesis or book-length projects, are reserved for higher tiers. Tier 1 gets access to the main lectures and discussions of the seminar, as well as a monthly office hours / AMA, Ask Me Anything, with McKerracher on the first Monday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So you'll see on the first Monday on the first Sunday of every month, it's at that same time, it's going to be the kickoff of the month lecture for me for this course. But then the following day at the exact same time, an opportunity to come to basically my office hours. Tier 2 TU members get everything included in Tier 1 plus an additional workshop on either writing or speaking. You choose. These take place on the second Monday of each month after the office hours thing. Finally, Tier 3 TU members get everything included in Tiers 1 and 2 with both of the writing and speaking workshops, as well as a monthly session that is focused on your book, thesis, memoir, or novella project. You can choose your membership, blah, blah, blah. You can also pay me these other ways, blah, blah, blah. It's all right there. How we meet, it's Zoom. It's all here. And then it's just got a bunch of other details. And then you can actually see the schedule as it's coming together here, saying first Sunday, second, first Monday, second Monday, third Monday, saying that kind of thing is very intuitive for some people, and it's very useful for keeping things consistent, but also sometimes it's more confusing and you actually it's not gonna help at all. I'm about to close out, so raise your hand if you want to ask a question about any of this or say something that's straggling from before. Otherwise, when I do close out, we'll be able to talk a little bit longer off the record if you're interested in that. I'm just saying this right now so you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll just be closing out. Okay. So the overall arching themes of the months are January, Xenophon and the Good Life, February, Family versus Capital, Harrington and Lash. March, regenerative agriculture, agra being in parentheses, regenerative culture being the real point, Barry and Salatin. April, rootedness in canonical voices, Susan Weisbauer and the Blooms being both Harold and Alan. Great guys, different guys, both Blooms. May, this is a very different month because we're going to do everything from a normal month all in the span of a week. And then I'm dropping out from life for another month and a half. I'll be dropping out to go be a dad. And so there's a bunch of stuff that you'll be encouraged to do while I'm away during the rest of May and in June. It'll say David McKerracher will be a new dad or he will be grieving. It's one of the two options. And either way, you should plan on not seeing or hearing from him at all. During this month, you'll be expected to work on your practicum and or thesis project. Sunday, the ... philosophy of religion, question mark. I'll say something about that in close. And then also plan a report for McKerracher's return. You can also, during that time, be scheduling stuff with other people, reading groups. I know Jacob's always down to do those. There's a lot of awesome stuff happening with that, always, thanks to Jacob, sort of leading the way. But yeah, if we just look at a single month, it's got that Sunday the 4th, first Sunday of the month, philosophy, stewardship, and home economics thing. Then you see down below on the third Sunday of the month is my intro to theory lecture. That's where you get the intro to Marx, Heidegger, Lacan, Levinas, Bourdieu, Baudrillard, etc. The guest lectures will sometimes be Sundays. Usually those will be Saturdays. The guest lectures will be on Saturdays. Philosophy of religion is most likely going to be on Sundays, specifically the second Sunday of every month. This could get moved to a Saturday, so don't hold me to that because Sundays are a busy day for Mr. Samuel Lonkar. And that's right, I am announcing it. He is going to be teaching philosophy of religion. I said I'd say something about that. Here we go. This is something that came about in just the last week. I mean, we've talked about it like 100 times over the last 3 years because Samuel and I like to keep up with each other and really respect one another's work and everything like that. But he was, in the past, it wouldn't have worked. I tried to get him to do this last year, but actually this is the year where things have lined up in such a way that this works. And so I'll read something about that. It starts with, gods gave birth to humans according to human myths. Now humans are giving birth to gods, AI being the most prominent among the fledgling new divinities. What are the intellectual conditions necessary to understand such an epic and consequential arc of philosophical development in which science, technology, and humans' deepest fears and aspirations are united? The answer is the philosophy of religion. The field of philosophy of religion was born with academic philosophy itself, fashioned by Immanuel Kant and consolidated by the German idealists. It underlies Marxism and the modern idea of secularization, and concerns such questions as the nature and scope of reason and science, human nature and its connection to the cosmos, the origin of the gods and their significance to human being, and the meaning of emancipation, freedom, and a kingdom of perpetual peace, classically figured as the kingdom of God and inscribed into the global order through the Constitution of the United Nations. This course, the first presentation of a book project on this topic by the teacher, will introduce the philosophy of religion as an academic field, offering an original approach that will explore the evolution of humanity's deepest ideas through the stories of the gods, their rise and fall, and perhaps contemporary rebirth. And it's got lots of really cool shit. Like, for instance, the second week, I really like this one, the marginalization of philosophy of religion and the capture of philosophy by pseudoscience. And for anybody thinking about, like, well, what's Samuel's position on all of this stuff? I'll just say, like, the best conversations I've had about philosophy of religion were with three people: Benjamin Studebaker, Samuel Lonkar, and Daniel Garner. And something that's really cool about the emphasis of the courses, seminars, and books by Samuel Lonkar is that he takes the question of philosophy and philosophy of religion and philosophy of science, and science versus religion. He takes that to be like the most important, like that is his emphasis. That's what he focuses. I love that is what he focuses on. And this is one of those things where it's like, I would have put this syllabus together if I knew how. There's a lot of things that he's got planned that I have wanted to go deeper into. Some of the things I already do know about, but a lot of it I don't. And a lot of you won't until that book comes out. And so this course is part of his development of this actual book. So it's a really cool thing to be a part of. And just know that, kind of like how Benjamin was saying, that, TU gives a special audience that encourages new kinds of writing from him. I think it's kind of similar here as well. Whether you are an atheist, a theist, a pagan of some sort, it doesn't matter. You're going to get something from this. And spoiler alert, as far as his thing is, I think he's a religious atheist. He's not a Christian atheist like Slavoj Žižek. He's a religious atheist. And I think that means that instead of being spiritual but not religious, like a lot of people, SBNRs, spiritual but not religious, SBNR. No, he's more like the opposite, which is to say religious but not spiritual. I don't know about that. He'd probably, no, I think he's a very spiritual guy. Anyway, with that said, everybody, this has been fun. I appreciate you all. Hurrah, we made it. 2025, over and out. Love it, hate it. It's over either way. And 2026 is going to be base. It's going to be awesome. We're going to love it. I promise. And so with that, I'm done. And this is over. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Peace.